Athenaeum of Philadelphia's virtual fall speaker series. I'm Beth Hessel, the executive director, and welcome you here. Tess Galen, you can see also on the screen as our events coordinator, does a fabulous job getting you all registered and the link out to you. And at the bottom you see Richard Dietrich, who is our speaker tonight. The staff and board who are with us tonight as attendees are delighted to welcome longtime members, new friends, and curious seekers to our program tonight. We take great pleasure in providing high quality, intellectually engaging programming that connects our minds and hearts to the beating heart of our city and our nation and our world through historical investigation, literary pursuits, and deeper knowledge of arts and architecture. If you're new to the Athenaeum or have been attending our programs for a while without taking the plunge, I invite you tonight to become a member so you can support our work and experience the full range of membership benefits in a historic member-supported circulating library and world-recognized research institution. Before I introduce our speaker this evening, I wanted to remind you of a few little functions on Zoom that might help you enjoy this program. Up in your upper right-hand corner, you should see a little square that says either speaker view or gallery view. If you want to see the speaker, you want to click it and you will just see the person who is speaking at that time and not the rest of us. Down at the bottom of your screen, you can see the Q&A icon. It has two little bubbles on it. Anytime during the talk, during the program, you are welcome to type in a question that you have for Richard. And during the Q&A time, I will moderate the questions and make sure that your question gets asked as time permits. Now, I would like to introduce you to H. Richard Dietrich III. He's a longtime member of the Athenaeum, grew up as a child of the Athenaeum, as his father was a member. He is also the president of the Dietrich American Foundation, and he has spent his career working in nonprofit management. As president of the Dietrich American Foundation, Richard oversees his father's rich and important collection of American art that spans from the 1700s through the 1800s, lending work to more than 100 institutions, including the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is currently showing through November 15th the exhibition, A Collector's Vision, Highlights from the Dietrich American Foundation, which I hope tonight's program, if you haven't already seen it, will spur you to get over to PMA to see this wonderful, wonderful exhibit. Tonight, Richard will share with us more about the collection, the exhibition, and the book that accompanies the exhibition. So I invite you to join me in welcoming Richard to our screen and to the Athenaeum this evening.
Beth, thank you very much. I really am so honored to be here, and it's sad that we can't be all together at the Athenaeum. And this is a talk that I've been looking forward to for a long time. And as COVID started to sort of shut down opportunities for real social gathering, I still held out hope that this would happen in September. And then, of course, all these things became impossibilities. But I want to really applaud the Athenaeum for pivoting so early on with this online platform and the amount of speakers that you have in these Zoom talks and the connecting of people that you're doing even during these difficult times is really tremendous. So again, I'm so honored to be here, and here we are. We've got participants who are deciding to spend their hour tonight with us, and I'm honored that you're here. I'm so glad to be speaking about a book that Beth mentioned, and I'm going to hold it up. It's this book, In Pursuit of History, A Lifetime Collecting Colonial Art and Artifacts. And the book was produced by the Dietrich American Foundation. And we decided to do a book about 4 years ago, and we decided to do it for a couple reasons. We wanted to create something scholarly, and then we also wanted to describe a collection, and importantly, a collector, my father, H. Richard Dietrich Jr. And the collection is essentially a lending library, is what we consider ourselves to be. We're closely partnered with the Philadelphia Museum of Art. We have about 2,500 different objects. A large concentration of objects are at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And then at any given time, we have things on loan at about 30 different museums, historic houses, other cultural institutions. And then I should also mention that about 1,000 or more, I think really about 1,200 objects are works on paper. They're books and manuscripts, and the vast majority of those are at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. So again, when we went about thinking about this book, we first, as a board, identified authors. And I want to give credit to the authors because, and some of them are people really, most of the participants on the call, most of the listeners are going to know. And Kathy Foster at the Philadelphia Museum of Art wrote on paintings. David Barquist wrote on silver. Kathy and David are both on the board of the foundation. Morrison Heckscher, longtime chair of the Met's American Wing, wrote the foreword and was just a key figure in advising on the book. Morrie's also on the board. And then Ned Cooke at Yale University wrote on furniture. And then the board is rounded out by myself and also my brother, my sister, my wife Ginger, and my sister's husband, Jesse, my brother-in-law. So that's the board. And then other authors involved were Debbie Rebuck, our longtime curator, wrote on Chinese export porcelain. Lisa Minardi wrote on Pennsylvania German, Pennsylvania Dutch objects. And then Michael Dyer at the New Bedford Whaling Museum wrote on whale trade related objects. And then finally, two other key figures in this, Bill Reese, the former amazing books and manuscripts dealer in New Haven, had written on books and manuscripts for us. And then Phil Mead at the Museum of the American Revolution here or there in Philly wrote the captions for that. So I'm going to turn it over now to share my screen and show you all some slides. And this is such an image-rich book that I think that it's really important that you see some of these images. So again, there's the cover of the book, and it's open to the Chinese export chapter that Debbie Rebuck wrote. And there's a full cover jacket. And the reason I show this is it's kind of a nice image, but it also highlights the design work for the book. And that was Miko McGinty and Company in Brooklyn, New York. Amazing small design shop, these women designers who just did this incredible job on this book, and we just loved it. And at the bottom, I want to point out that Yale Books, so again, we as a foundation published this, the Dietrich American Foundation. We did it in association with the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and then we were lucky to have Yale University Books be the distributor. And Yale Books has made available a discount. It's normally $50. If you key in, when you go to Yale Books, this YEIPH, again, that's YEIPH. IPH is for In Pursuit of History. You get a 25% discount. And, I want to mention one more thing, actually, related to that. So this is a book talk, and we're not together, and normally there would be a book signing. I want to give everybody my email address, and I really invite you to email me if you've purchased a book or you plan to purchase a book. I'm really happy to write a note, and you can put that inside the book if you choose. And so my email address is hrichard.dietrich. That's hrichard.dietrich, all one word, Dietrich's D-I-E-T-R-I-C-H, hrichard.dietrich@yahoo.com. And I'm really, really happy to do that. I am also happy to answer any questions that people have that aren't answered at the end of the talk via email as well. So there's the book in the Smithsonian Museum of American Art in Washington, D.C. And I do also want to say photography was really key to this. Gavin Ashworth did the photography of the sort of the three-dimensional objects, furniture, and a lot of other objects in the book. And then Cliff Salen of William Reese and Company did the books and manuscripts. So this is an image of my father. This was from 1963. And this is about 3 years after he graduated from college in 1960. He's about 25 years old there. This is the family business. This is Luden's Cough Drops. So my father graduated from college in, as I said, 1960. He went on to business school. In 1962, his father passed away, and he was forced to withdraw from business school and really, at that point, go into the family business. And so again, this is the family business. And it's something that really I get into a lot in the book. I'm not going to get into a lot in this presentation, but it was fun to write about the family business and about Ludens and some of that story. It was purchased by my grandfather and my great uncle, and they did it at the astounding ages of 19 and 24. They were from Reading, Pennsylvania, where Ludens was located. They had an uncle who had really taken them under his wing, and he encouraged them along the way, and they floated a bond. They won the confidence of William Luden, this gentleman, the founder. And after that, it was off to the races. And Luden, again, this was fun to write about in the book, because Luden was this really brilliant entrepreneur. And I think his story is kind of untold, and you can Google him and you can learn online. But what he did that was really special is, he started from nothing. He made candy. But then he came up with this idea to take a hard candy and add menthol and create a true cough drop. And once he did that, working with a pharmacist, it was kind of off to the races for Luden. And he grew the company in 1928. He sold it to these two very young men. Again, my father takes on the mantle after graduating from Wesleyan. Here's an early object that he collected in the early 60s. And this, in fact, is Wesleyan on a sperm whale tooth. And this is by a scrimshander known as the Connecticut Cityscape engraver. And it says, it's a little hard to read with the curve of the tooth, but it says view of the Wesleyan University, Middletown. And it's from 1830s. Wesleyan was founded in the 1830s. The tooth was actually engraved in the 1840s, but the depiction is Wesleyan in its early founding years. And this must have just been a great treasure for him. And, he started his collecting really as an undergraduate at Wesleyan. And what he was collecting, and that's sort of amazing. I wasn't collecting anything as an undergraduate. And what he was collecting was books that he really just enjoyed as a reader. So authors like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, Herman Melville, and he was, collecting second editions, first editions, if he could get them. But he was just collecting things he really enjoyed. When he took on the business, it was interesting that he really just delved kind of headlong into collecting. And looking back and thinking about all this in the kind of light of the project that we were all embarked on, it's pretty clear that he did this. He loved history, and he was really, Wesleyan University really spurred that love of history. But the collecting really became a source of comfort in a really, really ultimately very challenging and painful time in his life. When his father died, his mother died shortly after, all the kind of weight of the world was thrust upon him, and collecting was something that brought him a lot of joy. So another very early and really significant item that he collected is this letter. And books were his kind of first interest in college. Books and manuscript were really his first collecting interest out of college. And this was, it's a little hard to make all this out. You may not recognize the hand. It says, Dear Lund. This is a George Washington letter, and it's to Lund, Washington, who was the caretaker at Mount Vernon throughout the years of the Revolution. The really extraordinary thing, the contents of the letter are really extraordinary, but the date here, we've got Falls of Delaware, South Side, 10 December, 1776. And this was written in the winter. He would have been in his tent, and then the letter stops, and then it's resumed on December 17th. And of course, then 8 days later, the Continental Army crosses the Delaware, attacks the Hessian garrison at Trenton, and the sort of the momentum of the war begins to shift dramatically after that. But this is a letter written in his kind of darkest hour. He's writing about the plight here. He's writing to Lund, describing this terrible plight they're in. But then he also spends a lot of the letter writing about Mount Vernon and about the things that he wants done in the spring, the trees that should be planted, the horses at Mount Vernon that need to be purchased, and all these details of this estate that he loved. So I'm going to switch ahead here. Another letter. This one was another very early purchase. My father And this one, I think you can make out, again, this is a partial shot, but it's hard to show the whole letter and have people really be able to hone in. So this is a bit later, 1796. But the name here is A. Hamilton. And what this is Alexander Hamilton writing to Jeremiah Wadsworth, a delegate from Connecticut. And he's basically, in this kind of classic Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hamilton that we know now so well. He's writing and he's imploring this delegate not to vote for Jefferson, anybody but Jefferson. For in Hamilton's word, in Jefferson, we have everything to fear. Here in the song, Lin-Manuel's song, we've got A. Ham, as people might remember. It's A. Hamilton, but close enough. This is, again, Hamilton. This is a copy of the Federalist, and as we know, that would be Hamilton writing 51 of 85 essays, Madison, John Jay. And this is a truly extraordinary copy. It looks a little frumpy here, but it's what it is it's just an incredible 2-volume copy, and the pages are uncut. And so if you were to go and separate these pages, you'd be seeing a copy of the Federalist that has never been seen before. And it's just, the kind of condition of this is extraordinary. The other thing that's extraordinary about it is he bought this early on, and this one was put up to auction by a man named Henry Flint. And Flint was selling a chunk of his collection to fund Historic Deerfield. And what he was doing is trying to really establish that great nonprofit in Massachusetts. And so this is one of the things that my father purchased, as well as this from the Flints. And this is George Washington's name. It's a copy of the Acts of Congress from 1789. And this is, in fact, Washington's own bound copy of the Acts. It includes the Constitution. Washington at the time was president. And so, this is this incredible document. And it's not only an incredible document, it has extensive marginalia from Washington. And he's outlining the role of the president, the responsibilities. And it's really the most important book that Dietrich ever bought. We ended up selling this about 8 years ago, and the very, very happy outcome is that it was purchased by Mount Vernon. And we sold it as a foundation to raise money for the kinds of things that we wanted to do as a foundation. Mount Vernon has been a tremendous owner, as everyone can imagine. And this has been on tour. It's available to the public. It's in their library. It's just a tremendous thing. It's a great outcome. So kind of we're at, or at least virtually at the Athenaeum. So we've got to focus a bit on Philly here. This is an early important work of Ben Franklin. And this is 1733. And what this is a woodblock map that he produced that designated the border here between the Penns and the Lords Baltimore. And so he's here showing the border. And it also, I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of that. So this is something else, but it came with a pamphlet from 1733 describing exactly what that border is. William Penn, again, this is going back in time, 1733. Now we're at 1681. The reason I'm kind of jumping around is the way the book was done. And Bill Reese was the brains behind this. He wanted to select objects and then describe them in the order that they came in as a collection. And then all the other authors, Kathy, David, everybody else, did the same thing. And they spent so much time really interpreting, first of all, deciding on the objects to describe, and then interpreting how they came in. And in doing that, really painting this picture of the evolution of a collector. So here, again, William Penn. And what this is this is a pamphlet from very early on, printed in London. And it was basically a kind of a marketing piece for Pennsylvania. And it came with a map. And the map, same year, if you look at it, you've got the Schuylkill and Delaware rivers. You've got these blocks, this grid pattern. This really looks like present-day Philadelphia. And again, Penn here is trying to get people to come over to the new colony from England and other places. Jumping 135 years or so ahead to 1814, I believe that's the year of the founding of the Athenaeum. And here we have Francis Scott Key's Star Spangled Banner. This is the sheet music. You know, it's not that rare a copy for back then, but now, because it's so, you know, sort of, it wouldn't have been necessarily a cherished object back then. There are only 4 known copies of this, and it's in extraordinary condition. Ben Franklin again. This is just, you know, such a fun scene here, this image, this manuscript. This is Franklin writing to a fellow member of the Royal Academy of Science. And what he's done here is he's invented this magical circle of circles. And the circle of circles is basically, I think you can maybe see my cursor. There's a center point, and then there are these 4 points that emanate out. And then if you basically put the foot of a compass there and you put it anywhere else on the circle and you draw a line around, the circle is going to still contain, no matter which line you choose, no matter how small or big, it'll be 360, the numbers it passes through here. And then Franklin is basically saying to this individual, I can't wait to sit down with you and you know, show you everything else that this thing can do. Ben Franklin again. This is a really interesting piece. This is something that is a British printing speaking out against American opposition to the Stamp Act. So this was a really big deal in England, where they were decrying this American opposition. And Franklin here is writing extensively in the margins, clearly planning to write a rebuttal to this. And this is 1776. My father bought this in 1970. So in these years from 1963 to 1970, he's been just collecting an extraordinary amount of very, very rich material. This again is really an interesting and great Philadelphia-related document. This is all these wonderful 10 wax seals. These are kind of the who's who of Pennsylvania at that time. This is from 1766. And what these prominent individuals are trying to do is petition the crown for land in the Illinois country. So that would be Indian country. And of course, the British have just finished the French and Indian War. There's a proclamation line. They don't want to see that unravel. This would have encouraged kind of more westward thought. This was very much on the minds of people like this. We've got members of the Wharton family. We've got William Franklin. We've got a Joseph Galloway. Galloway was somebody who was much more moderate early on, a very, very prominent politician, who when the revolution actually started, he became a staunch loyalist and sided with General Howe, became the chief of police for Philadelphia. And then as Howe fled, Galloway fled with him. But what this does is it really illustrates that there was this urge to go west, and Washington had the same urge, and it was setting up for conflict. This is an interesting item. It's not related to Pennsylvania, but this is a John Eliot Bible, and it's among the first. This printing of Bibles was the first printing of Bibles in the New World. And it was actually printed in the Algonquin language, and the idea was puritanical, conversion of the native tribes of the Algonquins. And this is early. This date is 1663. And so just this incredible, fragile but so well preserved manuscript. This, again, relates to Native American objects in the collection. This is a plan of Fort Stanwix. This is present-day Troy, New York. It's built at the Oneida Station, so this is Oneida Territory, 1758, and Oneida Indian tribe, of course. Here we have a talk of George Washington to the beloved men of the Cherokee Nation. And this is signed at the bottom, not each copy, but it was printed with a signature of Washington. And this is basically a handbill that was taken out and it was distributed widely. But the speech was given in 1796, August 29th, by Washington. And what he's doing here is he's basically trying to get the Cherokees to really adopt European standards of agriculture, animal husbandry, and also, interestingly, to really have the Cherokee women not be farmers, but sort of take on more of the traditional roles of women. I was on a talk recently with Demetrius Udall at Wesleyan University, and he spoke about this and just how complicated this is, both in terms of Washington and colonists' views of Indians and women, and it's just a fascinating document. Again, here we have Washington and Franklin, and this is 1785, and Washington is here congratulating Franklin on 8 years of service as the diplomatic ambassador to the minister to France. So jumping ahead, here, 1858, and this is a wagon road guide. And so at this point, that frontier has shifted way west. And even the wagon road is, while it's arduous and difficult, it's not nearly as perilous as it was in the 49er days. And this is, 9 years later. And you could get a guidebook like this to kind of how to get out there. And extraordinary condition. Again, this isn't, wouldn't have been that rare in the day, but it's extraordinary. And it actually came from the Thomas Streeter collection, and Streeter was one of the greatest, he really was the greatest book collector of the 20th century, and my father purchased a number of things from the Streeter sale. So not to, but it's too tempting not to say. This is in their own Western migration. My father and his two brothers headed west to Chester County, about 40 miles west of Philadelphia, not quite a wagon trail out there. But this is a drone shot of some of that landscape, and that's in Chester County. There we have another shot. And what they did is they assembled 1,500 acres. And what the brothers were trying to do is assemble a working farm for corn and soy, but more importantly, a state-of-the-art dairy farm. And the dairy farm was to supply the milk for the milk chocolate in Ludens. And Ludens, of course, we all know cough drops, but Ludens actually made a lot of Fifth Avenue bars, but then also different forms of milk chocolate, either coating candies or solid chocolates for seasonal candies. And so the idea was this kind of vertical integration. What was really sad about this is they did create this state-of-the-art dairy farm. And the kind of tragedy in a way is that none of the milk, not a drop, ever made it into Ludens candies, because right about at the exact same time, best practices in candy making dictated that powdered milk was the way to go. And so one thing that did happen, though, you can see these cows eating, mostly what they ate was grass, but they would sometimes be indoors eating different grains. And some of the ground up Fifth Avenue bars that broke in the process actually made it back and were ground up and put into the meal for the cows. So they might have enjoyed that. And I gave a presentation to my daughter Olivia's class in first grade. They would have been bored with all of this, but it was just on Ludens. And one of the kids said, "Oh, that's where chocolate milk came from." And so maybe it helped the flavor of the milk. Okay, so Brincoed Farms. This is the farm that is now open space. And this is a wonderful tree on the property. The cow barn is long since gone. There's, of that 1,500 acres, 600 acres is now park and preserve, a combination of public park and also preserve that includes nature trails. And then running through all the property, the 1,500 acres is 10 miles of trails. And Natural Lands Trust did this. They were an incredible partner in this, just an incredible nonprofit out in Media, Pennsylvania. And they, as they sold land to individuals either bought it for agriculture or for their own use, and they subdivided, but then they put it all into conservation easement. So contiguous to this 1,500 acres was my father's house. This was originally built in 1721. You can see, if you can see my cursor, there's this section here, which was a room over room. My sister's room was up here. This room over room was an old house from the original house from 1721. And then the rest was added on over the hundreds of years, literally. And this is an original document from that very same year. This describes Joseph Pike's land. And my father's house was sort of right around here in this J area. And so, you know, what a great find. This was a survey map. It was all folded up. It's not a big map, but you can see all these folds to fit in a pocket. And Pike ended up selling off all these different parcels of land. And within, you know, by the Revolutionary War, it was in the hands of a family named Miller, and it stayed in their hands until my father and my mother bought the house in the late 60s and moved in the early 1970s. This is the den of the house. This is, you know, I show this because it's interesting. In the book, there are more pictures of the interior. But this also is the time when these very early 70s is when he transitioned away from books and manuscripts into decorative art. So he was collecting at that point chairs, paintings, the things that you see in this picture to furnish a house, and also just this fascination with these objects. And he was at the same time collecting books and manuscripts, but just less so. This was his earliest, most important piece. This was this you'll see later, but this was from a builder named Nathaniel Gould. It's I guess about 1770, Salem, Massachusetts. You'll see a more full picture of this, but this is this Bombay curved form. It's just a beautiful desk, slant front desk. You know, drops down. You use that as a writing space. This is a beautiful, what they call a tall boy, a tall chest, Lancaster County. And this is something that's, again, Lancaster County, so close to Philly. And this is by a Pennsylvania German artist. And we, you know, for a long time, it wasn't known who did this, but actually at the State Department's diplomatic reception rooms, there's a very similar one to this. And under one of the drawers in red chalk, it says M. Lind. And Ned Cooke describes this in his section. And so ours is so similar. It's clearly Michael Lind as well. And it's attributed to him. This, again, so I'm kind of getting into the decorative arts to give people a sense of what's in the collection. This is a really neat depiction, Philadelphia, Union Line. This was a steamship called the Philadelphia, and it traveled the Delaware River and the Chesapeake. And this would have been a commemorative piece made to promote the line, promote the ship. This, again, Chinese export porcelain, that Philadelphia line, you know, this shows the global aspect of things even 200 years ago. These are custard cups with lids. This has a great Philadelphia connection. This is the Sims family, a guy named Joseph Sims ordered an entire service of these. And this is from Debbie's section in the book. And Sims, what he's doing here, this is 1800, something like that. George Washington dies in 1799. And what's shown here is actually a tomb. And it's supposed to be Washington's tomb. We have, you know, what looks like a monument. There's an eagle on top. And there's a weeping willow, which would have designated, you know, which would have symbolized death and passing. And of course, this wasn't a depiction of an actual tomb. It was an imagination of what Washington's tomb would be. His real tomb wasn't built until 1831 at Mount Vernon, around the centennial of his death. But this shows the reverence for Washington. It also shows the global aspect. Again, these so soon after Washington dies, these are made in China, and they're shipped over to the American market to this Philadelphia family, and then they're enjoyed and cherished in Philadelphia. There we have China. This is a depiction of that porcelain making process. This is one of 6 images of the process. You have these things lying in the sun, baking, you know, drying. And merchants from Europe and America would have brought back and cherished these depictions to be able to show friends, this is the kind of stuff I did in China. These are the wares that I'm bringing back. They do this for porcelain. There are a lot of these that you'll see around, and then also the tea making process. There are a lot of depictions in the China-related objects that you'll see in museums and elsewhere. This is really just, I think this is such a great painting. And this is by a Chinese artist, as was the one before. This is by a Chinese artist whose Pidgin English name was Lam Qua. And Lam Qua painted this around 1835. And this is a Hong merchant. And so this individual would work with the American captain and supercargo of a ship. And he would help to transact business. And this badge that he wears designates who he is, similarly, this button on the top of his hat. But what's so wonderful is the human quality of this, the depiction of a person painted by a Chinese artist. And this would go into someone's home and be a very proud part of their home to show this is the individual that I work with and think so highly of. So back to Philadelphia. This in David Barquist's section, he writes about silver, but this is one piece of silver in particular. And this has an interesting American Indian connection as well. This is Joseph Richardson, and it shows the eagle, stars above. This would have been given as an act of diplomacy. And so perhaps an Oneida Indian would wear this as an armband and be, proud of their association with the new country, or accept it as a token. And in any way, it's traded, it's used as a tool of diplomacy. But the 15 stars here help to date it. And so this would be about 1692 to 1695. It has to be in that period because of the number of colonies. Again, the sort of scope of the collection, sperm whale teeth, again, George Washington, Martha Washington, a scene of whale hunting, a beautiful, urn with flowers, and on the other side, there are other depictions by a scrimshander. This whale trade and Philadelphia combined, this is just kind of a wonderful, very small painting. But here we have lamp oil. This is 55 Chestnut Street. And this dates to, I believe, 1818. And it's, yes, Joseph Schumacher. So again, this is kind of the time of the Athenaeum's founding. 4 years later, this is what Philadelphia looked like. And then here's Philadelphia some years later than that, 1855 to 1865. Here we have, of course, the Schuylkill River, and we've got the waterworks, which is depicted in a number of paintings, this incredible covered bridge. But then what's really conspicuously absent here is the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And of course, here are the falls, we'd have Boathouse Row above here. But there's sort of this glow emanating as if we need an art museum up there. And so, fast forward, we did do an exhibit at the Art Museum in February, and Beth kindly mentioned that. This exhibit opened early February. It shut down with COVID in mid-March with everything else, and now it's reopened. And so I really hope that those of you in the Philadelphia area are able to see it. Debbie Rebuck, our curator, did just an amazing job. It's not a big exhibit, but it so nicely represents some of the treasures of the collection. This is this Asian-related. We've got the Hong merchant. We've got a China trade scene, a great Japan high chest, Asian influence, not from Asia, Pennsylvania section, Philadelphia here, silver, Bernard and Huvier carved chair, Robert Feek's portrait of a lady, tall case clock, a New England section, this great Daniel Goddard chest of drawers, slate top table, early Boston. This is kind of 17 teens, I believe, 1715 to 25, with a great slate top on there. And then some Brandywine bowls, silver. And this great John Singleton Copley of Josiah Quincy, Boston merchant. Whale trade related items are depicted there, which is nice. They're not often at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. It's fun to install some of those. A mangled harpoon, whalebone, sailor-made box. And then some maritime items, a merchant ship, Liverpool jug, a China trade item. And then here we have that 55 Chestnut Street painting. You can see it's very small, War of 1812, Constitution versus Guerriere painting. And then this again is that Bombay chest, but this is the desk. This is in my father's home. And there's another John Singleton Copley of a boy with a squirrel, Paul Revere teapot. This was really in a very formal room, which was kind of a little off limits as a small kid, and you can see why. And here it is in the museum, and with the teapot, a Revere print of the Boston Massacre and the Copley. Of course, it's in a more responsible box, so it can't just fall off the top case. And if our cat had any luck, he'd knock it off. And there it is, up close. A Washington section, Edward Hicks, Washington passing the Delaware. And then in this case, we see the custard cup right in there. And then this is a Order of Cincinnati plate, Washington's order, his China. And then this is that great portrait miniature on the cover of the book. The miniature is by James Peale, brother of Charles Wilson Peale, younger brother. And he painted this in 1788. And Kathleen Foster really describes in her chapter just how warm this depiction of Washington is. And just shows Peale's reverence for Washington. He actually served 3 years in the Continental Army. Some of Washington's hair is in fact in there in this gold case that was added in the 1840s by a Pennsylvania volunteer militia called the Washington Greys, and they used it for ceremonial purposes. There's a etching of the crossing the Delaware, and on the other side, actually not depicted, is a view of Mount Vernon. So that is the end of my slideshow. Again, I'm really happy to answer any questions, but I do want to just remind my email is hricharddietrich at yahoo.com, and I am happy, if questions aren't answered, I'm happy to answer them via email. So I'm going to stop the share so you can actually see a bigger picture of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I hope that what everybody's appetite, not only wanting to see the exhibit, but read the book and learn more about these different periods of history and what these material objects say and tell us about these early periods in U.S. history. I'd like to open up now for questions. If you have anything in Q&A, I know earlier in your talk, someone wanted to know the name of the farm or farms in Chester County that you were referring to.
Yeah, so the farm that my father and his two brothers, my two uncles, purchased, the biggest part of the land was already called Bryn Coed Farm, and that means in Welsh, it means wooded hill. And so they added to that, but they named the farm Bryn Coed. And that's the name of, now that's the name of the preserve, Bryn Coed.
We have one person who started to type a question but didn't get it finished. If you want to finish that. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I am curious. I would love to know how your father made his decisions about what to collect and what items to purchase and what to pass up.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, again, I said that, you know, he derived this love from, you know, kind of immersing himself in the material and finding the material. But the other thing that he loved about it is that a community of collectors. And so there were these people along the way, both collectors, older collectors in some cases, who kind of mentored him in the early days. And then there were incredible people along the way who advised him. I mean, one person in particular, Lee Keno, was an incredible source of advice and helping my father buy things, especially furniture, but all sorts of objects. And for about 12 years, Lee helped him in the 80s to really assemble some of the great things in the collection. But then there are others. Eleanor Gordon was one. People in auction houses, John Hayes. I mean, there's a long list. I don't want to leave anybody out. But he loved delving into the subject matter and really interacting with all these people.
Right. Sounds like it was something that he just had a lot of fun doing.
A lot of fun. A lot of fun. Yeah.
So one of our questions is, someone wanted to know about all these documents and how you learned about them, and wondering if your father discussed the documents with you and your siblings.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about my father is that, first of all, we grew up in that house, which was a little like growing up in a museum, and the really great things ended up going to museums themselves because they went to the foundation. The foundation, as I said, was established early, but still it was furnished with this, period stuff, colonial period objects. And my father just loved to talk about it and share in these things. And so really it was hard not to grow up with him and kind of get some of this, enthusiasm around these objects early on. And I think, what he loved about the documents was that, kind of ability, it kind of gives you the chills when you see something written by Washington during Washington's darkest time. And you just think, what was Washington thinking then? And here you're touching something that Washington held and thought about. And there's something about the documents that I think really transports you back and I think is really inspiring. And again, that's the kind of thing that the Athenaeum is about, is these books, these documents, this kind of this recorded history that is just essential to all of our lives. And big part of the collection.
And I know you sort of mentioned this, a lot of the items went to museums, but the items that the foundation still has, where do you store them when they're not on loan?
Yeah, so we're really lucky in that regard that the Philadelphia Museum of Art allows us to store things in their great art storage down at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. And so really those are objects that might end up being on loan at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And if you were to go there, another thing that's happening at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, so if you go to the exhibit, which I hope people do, you'll see that there are galleries shut down. And the reason that they're shut isn't COVID, it's that they're actually doing this major renovation to open their new American galleries. And once those are open, there are going to be about 45 Dietrich American Foundation objects that move into those new galleries as very, very long-term loans. And so the Philadelphia Museum of Art, again, is this key partner in all of this. And we couldn't do what we do with the kind of budget that we do it without that ability to store things or use their conservation labs. So we're very much, we're very, very thankful to them.
So this one is a great question. How did they get the hair from Washington?
Oh, it's so interesting with the hair. That seems so odd, doesn't it? Like you'd think, what if I wanted hair from Donald Trump or, Joe Biden? They'd think you're crazy if you wrote to them and asked for their hair. But Washington, in fact, would oblige people. And it was very common back then. And I listened to a book talk that Bob Peck, a fellow Philadelphian, gave on hair. And he wrote a book on hair. And in fact, very, very often people collected hair and they'd write to these people and they would oblige. Washington would send his hair.
In fact, there's something, I forget how many special collections around the country have been identified as having hair that is more than likely Washington's, that he did just pluck it off his head. I don't know how I would respond if someone asked me for some of my hair, but that apparently was a thing.
I know. I don't know if I'd be so enthused, but it was a thing. Yeah.
Back before someone could just take a selfie with you, they wanted your hair to remember you.
That's it. Exactly.
And I think at the Athenaeum in our collection, we do have some hair art, which often you do that, especially when someone died. You would make jewelry or other things with people's hair as a way to remember them. So it could get a little ghoulish.
I know. So interesting. We don't have really any of those pieces in the foundation, but they're so fascinating. It's kind of more Victorian, more federal period, a little less colonial. So my father, but I don't know, maybe it just kind of creeped him out. But some of those things are so beautiful. I've seen that stuff and it's amazing.
It's something everybody's kids and grandkids can do in the pandemic if they're bored. Just
Exactly.
Well, I'll move us on to a few more questions.
Yeah.
was Stephen Girard one of the most prominent Philadelphia merchant traders with China in his days, or were there many other players?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I'm really glad someone mentioned Stephen Girard. That was, and I didn't mention his name, but that was kind of my motivation for putting in some of that China trade related stuff. Stephen Girard was huge, and there were obviously a lot of New England merchants, but Stephen Girard was very big over there.
I'm going to combine two questions because it crosses generations. Were your grandparents collectors of any kind before your father? And are you still collecting objects and documents?
Right. So that's a really interesting thing because my grandparents on my father's side really were not collectors at all, but all three of the brothers, all three of the sons did turn out to be collectors. And so it wasn't just my father, it was his brother Dan and his brother Will as well, and William. And so, the origin of that, I think, came from their mother, who really loved beautiful things and did instill in them this love of beautiful things. And then on my mother's side, certainly there was, her father was a collector and her mother of, sort of things from travels and loved beautiful objects. I personally, my wife and I, Ginger and I, don't really have an extensive collection, but we do have some objects, and we love portrait miniatures of, especially depicting children. And so Ellie Shushin, a great Philadelphia dealer in portrait miniatures, is someone who's a friend and who's helped us. And we love the size, and the sort of intimacy of those. And then also we have a collection of pattern molded glass flasks, and they're just beautiful and varied.
Nice. So another question, I understand the PA German things and the Revolutionary War objects. As to the whaling, did he go to Nantucket and New Bedford to look at their stuff? Did Moby Dick lead him there? John Meigs.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Hi, John. I think Moby Dick definitely did. I mean, Herman Melville was one of his favorite, writers in college. It remained really his very favorite book throughout his life. And so that was clearly an impetus. And he just loved the sea. Growing up, he loved to be around the ocean. He traveled there to Cape May as a kid. And he was a sailor. And, the sea just was something that really drove him. And so that story of seafaring and China trade and the whaling industry was something that he was fascinated with.
And one of our anonymous attendees would love to hear a little bit more about that of Philadelphia and its connection to the whaling industry.
Yeah, I'd actually be curious to know that as well. And of course, I mean, what I love in that painting is this lamp oil. And so while Philadelphia, the whale ships really came out of places, primarily Nantucket was the big place. And it's amazing how many ships came out of there, and then also New Bedford in Massachusetts. And then there were, prominent kind of fur hunters in different parts of New England that came out of places like Stonington, Connecticut. But as far as I know, there really weren't whale ships coming out of Philadelphia. They were from, different places. But Philadelphia was certainly a big recipient of whale oil. And then, of course, that whole market just crashed with with the discovery of oil in the ground in Pennsylvania, in fact. And so suddenly, all those opportunities kind of went away, and Nantucket went into this depression, and all those ships left. They went to other places. They went around California, and they, formed different companies. Those people left. They had to leave.
And did you loan any items when the Rosenbach did their Moby Dick exhibit?
No, but that's a wonderful, and it was so great that they extended that exhibit. And no, we did not. And that would have been great, though. It would have been great. I mean, I think they had a really nice lineup of things that they were showing there. And also, programming around the story and Melville.
Yeah, that was
great exhibit.
Fabulous exhibit.
Yeah.
Did your father have a copy of Wallace Nutting's Furniture Treasury?
Yes, but I don't know much about it. But I know that we do have a copy of it in the foundation has a library of books, and that's at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And Debbie Rebuck has that as you know, as resource material.
And the books and manuscripts in particular, and as well as the collections, are they available for scholars?
Yeah, they sure are. And actually, I'm really glad that you or someone else asked that, Beth. So again, that's a partnership with Wesleyan University, and we're really looking to expand that partnership. And Wesleyan is this great, you know, undergraduate institution, and they're inspiring undergrads to delve into original material. And so they're utilizing our collection to do that. But similarly, in their special collections at Olin Library, researchers can go, and Susie Taraba, who's the head of special collections there, would be more than happy to make things available. And again, people can email me, happy to, you know, share what we have there, help make things available to researchers. That's
fantastic. So I assume some of it's been digitized, and there's a inventory a little bit up there on their website.
Yeah, yes and no. Not enough has been digitized. And some of these things, like the known things, like the letter to Lund, is, you know, anybody can see the contents of that letter if you just do a quick Google search. But there's a lot of stuff that we have. We have some Civil War diaries. We have these incredible diaries of a loyalist, actually Galloway, Joseph Galloway's wife. And very little is known about a lot of these objects. So there's a lot of discovery to be done.
That's fascinating. I'm ready to take a trip.
Good.
Go dive in. Are there any other questions that anybody has while we have Richard here? I want to let you know, Richard, well, before everybody got on, we were talking about our backgrounds. Mine is a virtual background, and Richard was talking about how he was advised to set his up, be more Zoom friendly. So you got a compliment for your bookcase, Richard.
Oh, well, a friend of mine said, oh, you're doing a Zoom talk. You got to have a plant, you got to have pictures, and you got to have books. So my wife really helped me set this up with the sort of, and the friend also said it needs to be a succulent. So I do have this kind of cactus variety back there. Thank you.
Yes, so there was that. And before everybody logs off, and we thank Richard for this wonderful, wonderful conversation, we want to remind you, you can purchase his book through yalebooks.com at a 25% discount. I put that information in the chat room, and I think it was on the little slide going through. I think it's what capital YEIPH is the code. There you go. And hope you all sign up for some of our upcoming events. Tomorrow night, we have John Lawrence Larson from Purdue University speaking about Unmasking Progress Beyond the Culture of Exploitation, his most recent book from University of UPenn Press. Next week, we have Christopher Bonner from the University of Maryland at College Park speaking about runaways or citizens claimed as such, the claiming of citizenship by 18th and 19th century African Americans. And on Thursday next week, October 1st, we have Peniel E. Joseph from the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas, Austin, talking about the sword and the shield, the revolutionary lives of Malcolm X and MLK Jr. So I hope you'll come back again for more wonderful talks that encourage us to think deeply about our history and who we are as a people. I invite you to join me yet again in thanking Richard Dietrich for his time and generosity, and make sure you get over to PMA with your mask and your social distancing.